Every interaction I have with anyone who is suffering from pain and other symptoms is in some way the same. Everyone wants answers, doesn't know where to find them, who to believe, what to think, or even despairs that there are answers. My column system explains every corner of mind-body experience so that you know how to think and what to do to get better fast. The 3 columns, emotions, doubt, and power, are each tools to eradicate chronic symptoms, alleviate acute ones, and expand peace and alignment with yourself. If you need my help getting past your symptoms, you can join my teaching seminars at www.crushingdoubtseminars.org. If you haven't already, click subscribe, ring the bell for notifications, hit like if you like what you're hearing, and put your comments below, and we'll get back to you personally. In this episode of my Mind-Body Connection series, I look at the concept of radical acceptance as an often misunderstood term, and how a more accurate view of it can inform your mind-body healing process. The word acceptance is a varied one that can easily be misunderstood or misapplied. We can even have an entire conversation using the word and thinking that we mean the same thing when we don't. In mind-body work, this can play a critical role in getting better, particularly when it comes to the power column. Anyone who has spent much time around me or with the column system knows that one of the main goals of the power column is to accept the fullness of your trauma. But this then, of course, brings up the concept. What does it mean to accept something? So let's clear up a few potential misunderstandings with respect to what I mean when I speak of acceptance. First of all, my view of acceptance does not mean to be fine with it. I get how many people could interpret the word that way, but it isn't what I mean. Being fine with something is a way to accept something, but there are at least 2 problems with it being useful in my system. 1, you can't force yourself to be fine with something you're not, which makes acceptance on these terms something with which you cannot affect any change, rendering the effort fairly useless. And 2, the things we are trying to accept are absolutely not anything with which anyone would be fine. My view of acceptance also does not mean to accept the stance of other people. In my system, acceptance has to mean that something internally has been put to rest, and only you can know when that feels like it has happened. Acceptance is defined by you, but it should also not feel like a surrender or a giving up, though it can involve that as a step in the process, as I'll explain. Acceptance, as I define it, is about clarity and peace about that clarity, even if it is upsetting in some way. Being at peace with something means it no longer needs to be worked on or changed in any way. So acceptance isn't about feeling fine with something. It is about letting it be what it is in a way where that reality allows for steps forward and leaving some bad things behind. Radical acceptance, meanwhile, is another term that has some complicated aspects, and I think it will help us in these discussions to understand how the term can apply to accepting the fullness of our trauma. The reason I like the term radical acceptance is that it calls to attention the matter of degrees. Whether or not this is how others intend to use the term radical in radical acceptance, this is how I see its meaning and usefulness. We accept things, but not fully. We accept things on a regular basis, in fact, simply by not fighting the reality. But is that actual acceptance? So we're caught between a tepid acceptance that is defined by not fighting against reality but not liking it, and an over-the-top, forced acceptance, one that isn't even real, as we try to believe we have accepted something fully when we haven't. In my system, we are working for a different kind of acceptance. It's not one we like initially, but it is one we can like in the long run because, as they say, the truth shall set you free. This is why the word fullness is possibly the most important word in the phrase, you must accept the fullness of your trauma. Because even after we have done the work to finally let in the concept that we have suffered through a trauma or multiple traumas, we accept it only partially. Usually, this is because seeing the fullness of the trauma hurts way, way too much. In truth, the few times I have seen a full truth, it hurt like hell. And it hurt for a long time. But it brought clarity, and eventually the peace of mind that there was nothing to fight and nothing to try to change about the trauma. Instead, I could begin to change how I was living so that no further trauma had to occur. So accepting the fullness of your trauma means to let in the full reality no matter how painful. It means to give yourself time to process that trauma, including by receiving the symptoms communication about how bad it feels through understanding it as a representation of your emotional state. And it means to use that reality to guide you in how you want to live in the present and future so that the trauma won't get repeated anymore. This is why fullness is so important. It calls to attention the fact that we have not done all the work to get there. And why is it worth it to do, given how painful it is? Because it actually works in bringing lasting relief from trauma. It is the only way to get through the trauma to the other side of more full peace about it. You must let it in, and you must let it in full. People use the term radical to mean, essentially, extreme. Extreme acceptance is exactly what we're looking for, but radical acceptance cannot mean anything when it's not functional. So often, we say we're radically accepting something, but we aren't. Or we say we radically accept someone else, only to show them that it was actually quite conditional. The word radical doesn't just mean extreme. It means unconditional. And that is not easily achieved. In the case of a mutual relationship, it requires both people to let go of a lot of different things before they can radically accept each other, no matter how much we might want to do so. What it takes to accept things fully or to engage in radical acceptance is not only the will to do so, but the awareness of our emotional lives to such a degree that we feel we understand ourselves fully in the area we are trying to accept. If you aren't sure if you've achieved accepting the fullness of your trauma, that means you haven't. I don't mean this is bad news. You're far from alone, and it isn't easy to do. But the terms fullness and radical can help us remember to strive for more when it comes to acceptance, and to continue learning who we are, what made us that way, what has been hard about that, and how we can finally accept, with full clarity and no need to change the trauma, what happened to us. Use these terms by seeing their most useful and, to my mind, accurate meanings, and you stand a much greater chance of a power column breakthrough, understanding yourself more fully, and being able to accept this part of yourself so that you never struggle with it in the same way again. I really hope you enjoyed this episode on radical acceptance. If you haven't already, click subscribe, ring the bell for notifications, hit like if you like what you're hearing, and put your comments below and we'll get back to you personally.